All right, my good friends, this is Mr. Davis. First of all, just making this video here. I'm going to start out in our recaps of units 1 through 3. It says work in progress. The reason it says work in progress, I actually made this as we prepared for our final exam in the first semester. So that's kind of what I entitled it. So we're in unit 2. We're going to go through these review units pretty quickly. Now, you have a few things at your disposal for Unit 2 to study. You have the Silk Road, you have the Mongols, 2 PowerPoints, and you have this kind of this is an outline of what happened in Unit 2. And I'm trying to compile a list from other teachers and stuff and make a folder for spice charts that we can have one big folder of spice charts like we have already have a folder for your different AP review exam review materials. So we are going to start off. This is like the last couple trading networks of Unit 2. So Unit 2 is networks of exchange. So we are on page 9 of 15 in this review. So we're starting off where it says the Indian Ocean trade. So that's what I want to talk about, because it would not surprise me if your DBQ had something to do with trade networks. And the reason why it wouldn't surprise me is because you can make trade networks be a huge time period. You could talk about the Indian Ocean Trade Network back when they hadn't had all these technologies, and they were just relying on like the lateen sail and relying on the monsoon winds. And you can take trade networks all the way up until imperialism, when they start having steam powered ships and railroads and that kind of stuff. So trading would not shock me in the least if they had some type of DBQ about trading. So let's learn a little bit about the Indian Ocean Trade Network. Now, this is prior to 1450. So what I'm just going to type this in here. We were talking about 1200 to 1450. Okay, so Christopher Columbus, I'll just type this, 1492 sails the ocean blue. So this is 1200 to 1450. So I'm just going to go over this real quick here. The Mongols controlled the Silk Road, so the Indian Ocean Trading Network becomes gigantic. So there's a lot of reasons why people turn to the seas, and it's basically for a lot of reasons. One, you had your camel caravans. They were slow, took a long time. You had to transport luxurious goods because it was so costly to trade on the Silk Road, because it took forever, and they're camels, not ships. Whereas now we're going to see junk ships. So Chinese junk ships got a lot of junk in the trunk, a trunk of goods. So a big junk ship could have everything stored in the bottom. And we'll see Zhang He's fleet compared to Christopher Columbus's teeny tiny little ships. All right, so the Indian Ocean Trade Network, 1200 to 1450, is basically anybody who can get out into the Indian Ocean. So China's not like technically on the Indian Ocean, but they can sail through the Malacca Strait and get out into the Indian Ocean. And then it can be like, just if I was visualizing it here, here's the Indian Ocean in this big circle, Africa's here, Malacca Strait's over here, India's up here. I know I don't really give it justice, but basically you know what I mean. So anybody that's on the Indian Ocean coastline. That would include Zimbabwe and Africa. This is also going to be called the Swahili Coast, is a term that we see. The Swahili was a language that was created when Bantu is a language spoken in Africa. The Arabs spoke Arabic, and Swahili was a combination. You know, you add Bantu, you add Arabic, you get Swahili. So the Swahili Coast, and a big cultural thing that happens with the Indian Ocean trade is the transference of Islam. The monsoon winds, Muhammad, merchant, monsoon. The monsoon winds kept the merchants in their ports, and so the merchants spread their religion. In a lot of cases, they were spreading it to like the Malacca Strait, the merchants were spreading it to Hindus who were stuck in a caste. And so Islam didn't have the caste system, and the bottom, like Muhammad, was very low on the totem pole. So a religion that was started by a person very low on the totem pole would be pretty appealing to someone in a lower caste of Hinduism. So Islam gets transferred. You will see in this part of the world like rulers starting to build big shrines of themselves, like Angkor Wat. You see religion legitimizing rule. And so one of the big things that trade does is it trades religion. And you might get like a sort, like if it's something about Islam. Islam in Africa is different than Islam in Arabia. Like Ibn Battuta talked about how the Africans like said they were Muslim, but they still drank alcohol and they still like ran around with a wife and a mistress. And Ibn Battuta was shocked at how some of these quote unquote Muslims were living their life. But religion is huge on trading networks. So some other technologies, I'm not going to describe them all, but you can look these up. The Dow ship, the Latin sail, which means you can sail into the wind, against the wind, the astrolabe and the compass. Both the astrolabe is going to help you chart for any explorer, like on the land or on the sea, chart your route by the chart your route by the stars. So now, once they figure that out, they can start sailing on the ocean any time of year. And this is where all the goods were down here. The Europeans, I often say, the only thing they added were olives and wool to the trading networks. So this is where all the great goods were. You had your spices, you had your salt, you had gold. If you remember how we talked about once the people from India realized there was gold in Africa, they didn't have to go to Russia anymore, to Siberia to get gold. I mean, think about that. So this was tons of great stuff. So you can definitely, if you had to argue about the importance of one trading network over the other, Indian Ocean Trading Network is really awesome. And you also are going to see some famous guys in this Indian Ocean Trading Network. Marco Polo traveled to the Yuan Empire. If you get anything about trading networks, don't be surprised to hear about Marco Polo in one of your documents. Marco Polo traveled to the Yuan Empire. They said maybe even fought in a Mongol battle or two. Now, they did say some of his stuff was a little bit unbelievable, probably a little bit to sell books, but some historians think that he did at least accompany some Mongols on the battles. Is pretty wild. Like the most interesting man of all time. Ibn Battuta was a Muslim who traveled the whole Muslim world almost. Like I said before, he was shocked at what he saw the Muslims doing when he got drinking alcohol, sex before marriage. And then here's our famous eunuch friend. So a eunuch is someone that's in the Chinese government, and what they would do is they would castrate you so that you would be loyal to no ladies, you would be loyal to the government. So he was castrated. You could no longer have children or anything like that. And Zhang He was an explorer. He was from the Ming Dynasty. So I remember Zhang He, Ming Dynasty, because mariners, the Ming Dynasty, the mariners. Okay, so his journeys are about 100 years before Columbus. His fleet was far more impressive, but his legacy is not. He collects tribute and makes foreign leaders kowtow to the Chinese. Again, you see China in the Indian Ocean. There's a few things I want to talk to you about China, because we just wrapped up Unit 6, where we see China like falling apart. Like we see the Taiping Rebellion where 20 million people were killed. We see the Opium Wars where the Chinese get hooked to this horrible drug. We see the Boxer Rebellion, and we're going to see eventually the Qin dynasty get overthrown. But at this point, from 1200 to 1450 to during the life of Zhang Ha, he like the Chinese were bosses. Like if you were lucky enough for Zhang Ha to show up on your shores, you better have something pretty cool to send back to the Chinese court. And you would love to go back with Zhang Ha to the palace. Kowtow means bow down to the emperor, and tribute means you're bringing something to give them. Like people brought elephants, people brought giraffes, they brought gold, they brought all kinds of different stuff back to the Ming emperors. And Zhang Ha was a mariner. But one of the reasons, what happens that is so like this is like a really like kind of crazy thing in history. Like, what if something was different? What if Zhang Ha would have been allowed to just keep going? Like, what if the Chinese took their soldiers and just conquered everything in this Indian Ocean trading network? They had 100 million people at this time living in China, probably more at the time of Zhang Ha. Like, they could have conquered a lot of places, but they didn't. They were just out like on a fact seeking mission. They brought their facts back and they said, you know what? Yeah, we're gonna scrap this plan. No more seas, no more shipbuilding, etc. And the reason they said that is wait for it, the Mongols. The Mongols were above them. The Ming eventually got rid of the Mongols. Um, so what? Um, I'm just kind of going fast here. So what they said is, you know what? We don't have any problems out in the seas, but we've had problems before with our northern borders. Let's rip all Zhang Ha ships apart and let's start finishing up this Great Wall of China. So that's the Indian Ocean Trade Network in a nutshell here. Let us. So what you should hear. You should also read. Now you had a homework question, which we're going to do the same thing tonight, just on a different topic about writing your opening paragraph. You had a homework question about the Trans-Saharan route, about what was going on there: gold, salt, slaves, etc., different advancements. But tonight's homework is that we're going to look at the Indian Ocean Trading Network. So let's look at Zhang Ha a little bit more in depth here. All right, so this is Zhang Ha. I will have this for you as an attachment. All right, so let's just take some time here and read about the voyages of Zhang Ha. Okay, so I'll ask you some questions here in the Ed puzzle. If that's what I end up doing is making an Ed puzzle, I probably will. Um, let's go down here. So these are some sources. Like you don't forget sources like these. I'm sure you would be able to pick that out like that. But this was Christopher Columbus's ship. This was Zhang Ha's ship. This is great, just great outside knowledge. If you get anything about like a trading network on the seas, and you have to compare trading networks. There's tons of facts about Zhang Ha that you can use that probably won't show up in documents, but Zhang Ha had 255 ships. Christopher Columbus had uno, dos, tres shipos. I think that's Spanish for ship. I'll have to check with Miss Wheat. He had 27,000 men. Not sure if all of them had been castrated, but he had 27,000 men. Christopher Columbus had 90 men. Zhang Ha went on 7 voyages. Columbus went on 4 voyages. Soon after the legacy here. Soon after Zhang Ha's death, sea exploration was banned in China. The fleet was dismantled. All records of Zhang Ha's voyages were destroyed by Chinese officials. Zhang Ha was more or less lost to history. So that's kind of an interesting fact there about his legacy. All records of Zhang Ha's voyages were destroyed by Chinese officials. So this is a great example of what could show up like in a document. Um, like think of like why they would have destroyed it, and probably the reason why they destroyed the records of his voyages is because the government didn't want to do any more voyaging on the seas. So all the cool stuff and all the things they learned and he brought back and they changed the map, etc. Um, they they said, you know what, screw the seas, we're going north, we're protecting our borders. So that could be a reason why Zhang Ha's legacy is tarnished. He was lost for in history for about 500 years. So let's look at Columbus's legacy on the other hand. After Columbus's first voyage, Europeans' exploration took off. North and South America were conquered and colonized. The Columbian Exchange followed, marked by the trading of plants and animals, ideas, and plants, including slaves. So here we have two trading networks. You have the Atlantic triangular trade that's going to be created. The Columbian Exchange is a huge, like, that's why I wouldn't be surprised if there's something about the Columbian Exchange on your test, or something about the Indian Ocean Trading Network. So you could see something where you have to compare, trading networks, and just know that you can always find similarities. You can always find differences between anything. Okay, so that's some things about Zhang Ha. Okay, just other documents. This is different things that sample of tribute offered by foreign envoys at the Chinese courts. Pepper, horses, rhinos, lions, leopards, Arabian horses, giraffes, camels, etc., etc. So this just shows you, it shows you that everybody is trying to impress the Chinese, and the Chinese are seen as this amazing, amazing country that you want to be in good favor with. And you will see, like, if you get like a chart like this, there's going to be a description on the chart. It says foreign officials or envoys often travel with Zhang Ha's fleet. When it returned to China, they brought tribute. Tribute is usually money or goods given from a weaker country to a stronger country as a sign of submission and sometimes respect. Emperor Yongle almost always offered local kings and ambassadors gifts in return. Often these were bolts of silk, paper money, and copper coins. And that's kind of funny. They were giving away silk, which is, like made up from a worm, in return for like a giraffe. Just kind of funny. Like the Chinese are just kind of, let's just give them like a piece of silk. Let's give them a coin or some of our paper. Says Emperor Yongle, goods and treasures without name that were too many to be accounted for, yet they did not make up for the wasteful expenditure of the Middle Kingdom. So this is somebody that the Qing dynasty conquered the Ming, and this is kind of what the historians during the Qing dynasty, this is kind of what they surmised about Zhang Ha's voyages and Emperor Yongle. Basically, they said it was a waste of time. They wasted a lot of money. Let's get back to business, and the business is keeping the Mongols out of our territory, keeping the barbarians out of our territory. Okay, so I'm coming up with a sheet to give you. I want to make a chart for you as you read through the DBQ and take your test. You're going to have 45 minutes to take your test and to write a DBQ. It's going to be nerve-wracking. You can print off your sheets, which I've told you about in a previous ed puzzle. But I want to have a chart for you to use if you want. We'll practice it. We're going to do some 45-minute time DBQs and see how you do. Now, I'm going to give you this chart, and what it is basically it's going to have your thesis formula on it. Well, let's just start from the beginning. It's going to have your like a generic context paragraph setup. It's going to have your thesis formula, and then I'm going to have a chart for every document. You're going to get 5 documents, and the chart's going to say something like name of document. Or number document, number 1. Does it support your thesis? Yes or no? who wrote the document. So let me see if I can just bring it up really quickly. I don't know if I can find it here. Okay, so okay, I'm not sharing this with you just yet because I don't want to overwhelm you. The reason I don't want to overwhelm you is because I felt like you did a much better job on today's homework, like about I think it was the Mongol DBQ. I think you did a much better job than you did on the Silk Road because I gave you kind of a format of how to set it up and you just did it perfectly. So I don't want to like give you too much too fast. I don't want to throw everything again up at you. But I do just want to show you what I'm kind of thinking of. Like, so I might, well, I will. We'll just have to see if it works for you during the exam. Like, I'm going to give you a chart to have out during your exam if you want to. So the step one is going to say, like, read the prompt. Step two is I'm going to say, what are they asking you? And this, you can just like circle some things. What are the topics? And then I'm going to have a spot for you to just jot down facts. What is the time period? 1200 to 1450, etc. So this is a work in progress for me. So I'm gonna, like I said, I'm gonna have a sheet like this for you, and you're gonna get 5 documents. So as you read your documents, you're kind of taking notes. I'd like for you to have this chart just so you can jot down things really quickly and you can refer to the chart when you write your essay because time management is going to be critical. You have 45 minutes to not only read all 5 documents, but then start formulating your essay and writing your essay. So if we can work with a document like this in practice, and it helps us with our time management and it helps us refer to different documents, and is this document 1 helpful for your thesis? Is document 2 hurtful for your thesis? Over here, who wrote this document? Could you hip that for a point? Okay, so like I said, I'm not finished with this by any means, but I'm working on this for you. I want you to be able to have something like this going into the exam. So that being said, let's just look at this. This is document E. So I'm going to give you some time to read this. There. So document E. Okay, so this was a pretty tough read. If I don't think you're gonna get 5 documents this long. Well, one of them is gonna be a picture, so you're gonna get like a chart. I don't think they're all gonna be quite this long. I think maybe probably one will be this long and one of them will be a little bit shorter. But okay, so like this shows you how impressive the Ming were and how impressive um, Zhang Ha was. And you can pick out some quotes in there and certain things that kind of talk about how big of bosses they were. here, but this was carved into a stone pillar near the city of Zhangel on the east coast of China just before Zhang He departed on his last voyage. The excerpt was followed by short descriptions of each of the first 6 voyages and the plan for the seventh. It is the closest thing historians have to a document revealing Zhang He's words and ideas. Okay, so this was carved basically at a port. So this might be maybe a difficult one to hip, but you could do it for sure. The historical significance of this was that they wrote this right before he went off on his 7th and final voyage. The intended audience would be anybody who was living in China, and the point of view, why they took the time to carve it in the stone. Carved in the stone is important. They didn't write it on a piece of paper. They carved this as a monument to Zhang He. And so the point of view of the person that did this carving, this inscriber, was that Zhang He was an amazing person, an amazing sailor. And the purpose of it was that it wanted to show how impressive Zhang He was and how impressive the Ming dynasty, the Ming Chinese were. So, like, if you go back to that chart I was telling you about, like if this was document E, so and this inscription, and this would be pro D. Outside evidence, I leave a space for outside evidence. And you can even just jot some things down to help you hip this one within your writing. You only need to hip 2 documents. So like if this really historical setting, this I'll just do H. Okay, so that's what I would have you do. And after we do this a while, I mean, like you wouldn't have to do this on the test, but it'd be something that would be helpful. So I just want to do that with you tonight to show you this a little bit. But I am going to put one more prompt up, and I want you to read this Indian Ocean. So it's like basically all I'm asking you to do is read page 8 and maybe it's 9 and 10 or something right here. So I guess this is page, just read 9 and 10 of this document. And then I'm going to put a DBQ prompt up, and I'm going to have you generate another opening paragraph. Remember to do the generic, um, um, like kind of context setup of your opening paragraph, and remember to do the although X comma A plus B therefore D to create your thesis. So I will have that set up for you. So I'm going to end this here, and hopefully that wasn't too painful for you. I will say as I end this, I know that this is a grind. I know that you don't have to do this in all your other classes, and you have the choice whether you want to take the AP test or not. I think you can be successful. I really appreciate your sacrifices to do this. So you really have to want it if that's the case. So keep grinding, keep pushing through this, and we'll catch you on the flip side.